What up, this is Rama Screen covering movies, TV, and entertainment, and here's my review of the new documentary, I Am Richard Pryor. Let's rock this. Okay, first up, I would like to thank Viacom and Paramount Network and Comedy Central because at this past South by Southwest 2019, I had the opportunity to interview Richard Pryor's widow, Jennifer Lee Pryor, about this documentary. So go watch my entire interview with Jennifer right here on Rama Screen YouTube channel. I'll provide the link in the description box below this video. Okay, so now on to this review of this highly anticipated documentary, which I find very illuminating. Even if you're not a Richard Pryor fan, or if you're too young to know about Richard Pryor, this documentary explores the story of a very complex person with many facets to him, all of which are interesting. And on top of that, Pryor went through the times in our country's history when not only was it dealing with civil rights era, but also with what was acceptable and not acceptable in terms of television and comedy at that time. Now, I was a late bloomer when it comes to being a fan of Richard Pryor because I grew up in Asia, so there were a ton of Asian comedians that as a kid I adored and admired. So not till later on that I finally came across or watched old archival footage of Richard Pryor's stand-up comedy, and I was like, whoa, who is this funny man? And eventually I learned about the legacy and the influence that he left behind, and also got to watch many of the movies that he starred in, including Superman 3, which to this day is not my favorite Superman movie. It was a downright terrible sequel if you ask me. But back to this documentary. We, you and I, many of us, we know about Richard Pryor the comedian. But this documentary digs deep into Richard Pryor the person. And my God, up until this docu, I had no idea about Richard Pryor's incredibly hard upbringing. That he grew up in a brothel run by his grandmother, the same brothel in which his own mother worked as a prostitute. And at one point it was said that Richard, as a kid, looked through the keyhole and witnessed his mother having sex with one of the clients. A very impoverished life that I would not wish to happen to any kid. But as this documentary indicates, that part of his life, as messed up as it was, became his rosebud. Rosebud, of course, is the term from the classic movie Citizen Kane, because that whole childhood experience shaped Richard Pryor's view on life. It affected his comedy, his relationships with women, his fear of abandonment. It even got loosely depicted in one of his movies later on in his career. Another thing that I think you'll find very intriguing about this documentary is the way it showcases the evolution of television and comedy. Early on, Richard seemed to be forced to box himself in within the boundaries of what was perceived as white America television. So Richard had to kind of emulate his fellow comedian Bill Cosby, who by then has become such an expert at playing for the audiences of white America television, so much so that many did not consider Bill Cosby black. But as time went on, Richard Pryor could not deny who he was or where he came from and his past. Ultimately, he found his voice and he stuck to his guns, and that is what made him a controversial trailblazer. Because if it weren't for folks like Richard Pryor, comedians today like Tiffany Haddish, Mike Epps, or Kevin Hart would be hesitant to experiment with their material in fear of getting shunned by either TV or movie studios executives, you know, the gatekeepers. But Richard Pryor kicked that door wide open for them. In a time when America was so uptight, she walked like she had a broom broke off in her butt. I would argue that the Richard Pryor that you'll see in this documentary is incredibly flawed. And that is a good thing, because more than often we put our idols and our heroes on pedestals as if they could do no wrong. But Richard Pryor had a cocaine addiction And unfortunately, he beat his wives, and he had that blunder in front of the LGBTQ audiences at one of his performances. So this was not a man who was angelic by any stretch of imagination. But there is something to admire about the fact, yes, he came from a brothel life, but boy, all he ever wanted was to be a comedian and to be a comedy star. And he made that happen. Even when the powers that be were saying there is no market for black comedy movie stars, or that movies starring black lead comedian would not sell, and so on and so forth. But he persisted. The documentary itself, in terms of its format, is pretty formulaic. There's no fancy smancy animation to illustrate certain moments in Richard Pryor's life, like some other documentaries would often resort to. But there are enough talking heads, and there is enough archival footage to take you through that journey and help you get to that place of understanding what this man was all about. I Am Richard Pryor is enlightening, it's informative, at times it's heartbreaking, but definitely a must-see, one of the best documentaries of 2019. I Am Richard Pryor debuts this Friday, March 15th, 2019, only on Paramount Network. So go watch it. So that's it. That's my review of I Am Richard Pryor documentary. Share your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, subscribe to my channel and press that like button and ring that bell so you can get notified whenever I post new videos. Hey, if you like this review and you want me to make more, please contribute monthly to help support this channel at Rama Screen Patreon page. Become my patrons today at patreon.com/Ramascreen. Let's rock this.